Hey, Mike Catalana along with Dan Fetes. Thanks for joining us on Buffalo Plus and the Buffalo Plus YouTube page. It's breaking news today, Dan. Your first thoughts. Matt Milano's back.
Surprised? I guess it seemed like a foregone conclusion, but I guess now we understand the moves that were made with releasing John Brown, with releasing Quentin Jefferson. I guess it now makes more sense as to why they were freeing up the money. We didn't know whether it was going to be a pass rusher. We didn't know where they were necessarily going with it. It's Matt Milano, and it seems like an okay deal. At least that was my first impression, Mike.
Yeah, I think the money is pretty good. Like, you don't know what's actually out there. And of all years, it's a good year to have one of your guys who wants to test the market because the market is so strange. That being said, a team like New England's got a lot of money and they need players. And for once, they may have been spending it, or even Miami that still has money to spend. But that's not the case. Now, let's start with this. I think we would both agree Matt Milano is a pretty good football player. And 100%. I think his skill set does help the Bills a lot. I have no problem with Matt Milano being on the team, and I have no problem with them wanting to have him back.
Mm-hmm.
I do look at it and say, okay, what else are you going to do here? Because it does not address what you just mentioned, the pass rush. Is there another way they're going to find that guy? Is that where they're going to look in the draft and hope one of these young guys is ready to go, or AJ Epinesa is better in this upcoming year? Because it really is, a big priority now with linebackers, because in a couple of weeks, they're likely going to be committing that fifth-year option to Tremaine Edmonds too.
Yeah, this just seems like a let's run it back kind of move. Like that, and that's surprising to me because I think we can all be honest that the Bills' defense last year was okay. It got better as the year went on, but it was not a top 5 defense that we have been accustomed to seeing under Sean McDermott and Leslie Frazier, where we went, you can't let Matt Milano go because of how important it was. We all knew how important he was. That was never the question, or how vital he was to the team. The team only lost one game when he was in the lineup. The question is what did you do when he wasn't in the lineup? And so we all know those concerns. But Matt Milano solves the question of who's going to be alongside Tremaine Edmonds. But it is interesting, Mike. You've talked about it. You really only usually pay one linebacker, and there will be now a lot of money tied up into both guys. But this does go with the Brandon Beane thing. And I know people are probably watching this right now going, guys, draft, sign and all of those things. But that, unfortunately, when you draft guys low and they exceed your expectations, normally they price themselves out of your team.
Yeah. Now, I say this all the time about signing one guy, and they have signed both of their safeties, so they do pay certain players. Again, you're not breaking the bank with any of these guys, right? But it is a matter of manipulating the salary cap. Again, Matt Milano can play. I like his skill set in the 2021 NFL. I like a lot about him. I know Tremaine Edmonds just came out and said, I don't know what phrase he used. I'm going to shock people, shut people up, whatever it is. I hope it is, because I still see the high end ability in that guy. And maybe it does start to come out. He will turn 23 this year, by the way.
Gotcha.
Soon. But anyhow, Milano being back, when I say I'm surprised, you were on the call with Brandon Beane at the end of the year. He brought up the injuries.
Yeah.
Is that a concern? It's a concern, right?
Yeah, it still is. The injury history of Matt Milano doesn't disappear when he resigns with the Bills. That is still a very real thing. So and I wonder, Mike, if the picking up the 5th-year option on Tremaine Edmonds and what they do with Edmonds, they were knowing how well Edmonds plays with Milano. Like it's almost like they're a pair of defensemen, on a hockey team, or a pitcher and a catcher. Whereas okay, is Tremaine going to maybe now take a little less to play with Matt for all these years? And we have talked about it time and time again. I feel like I've gotten in Twitter fights with people that players are allowed to get their money, and they should go get their money, and that people are surprised of, take some money to win with the Bills, and you want to win, so you got to take less money. The want to win never goes away. Nobody signs with Jacksonville and goes, I'm done working out. This is fine. Money's a real thing. And we are seeing the bloodbath that Diana Rossini was expecting. So that was where, Mike, you talked about surprise. I think that's where I was, just because of, maybe we should have expected this, that there isn't necessarily teams with a lot of money to spend $16 million on Matt Milano this year. So from what we're hearing about the numbers, it looks like it could go up $9 million towards the last 2 years of the deal. Where will the Bills be then? I guess we'll talk about that in 2 years.
Yeah, and we know what happens in those 2 years. Look what happened with John Brown. I mean, those are just numbers on a page as it gets to a certain point. I guess you could also look at it and say they pick up the fifth year option on Edmonds. Excuse me, he comes out, and then he plays next year under that, and then they make a call on it, right? I mean, and by that point, now Milano has played the first 2 years of that deal. So it's it's in terms of Edmonds, it's Edmonds now, and then Edmonds on his fifth year option, so they could still do it that way in terms of paying. But
because Mike, because that's an interesting point, because we talked about having backup plans. And as we saw with John Brown, I don't know if you know this, Mike, but Gabriel Davis played really well this year and made it very reasonable to move on from John Brown. And I remember us talking throughout the season going, they didn't really draft the linebacker to replace Matt Milano. And Brandon Beane has talked about how you want to draft somebody to fill in, not immediately, but a year down the road. So I still don't think the Bills rule out drafting a linebacker that they see replacing Milano or Edmonds. In 2 years. So whether that's a second round pick. And so Mike, as you're talking about that you get, you evaluate Edmonds and Milano in 2 years, where the money really starts to kick in on Milano in 2 years, and Edmonds will then be hitting the market. It's almost like Beane was successful at kicking the can down the road for 2 years and going, let's see where the cap is there.
Well, the cap's going to go up because TV. We just keep throwing money at the NFL. And so the cap is going to go up in future years. So they do have more to spend in that way. It's funny. I sort of want to kick myself to say from a year ago, and we've played the soundbite multiple times of Brandon Beane. And I had asked him that day about wide receivers. And that day, my first thought was John Brown, because the Bills were thinking at that point of drafting a wide receiver, maybe in the first round, was before they had made the deal for Diggs. But John Brown out, have the money to sign Matt Milano in the offseason. And then as the year went on, Milano still played well, had some injuries and all this. And here it is. Yesterday, John Brown is cut. And today, Matt Milano is signed. So that's how it ended up working out. I just thought, to your point, Milano may have priced himself into a point where the Bills didn't want to spend there. But hey, look, I don't know if you know this, Dan, but agents aren't allowed to talk to players until Monday. Matt Milano's agent knew what was out there. Right? He didn't get formal offers. I mean, they can't just blatantly cheat and start sending offers. He knew what was out there. Probably was close. Once the Bills stepped in, I will say one thing about this organization: they don't leak. This is not like the old days with the Bills where the ship was going down because there were leaks all over the place. They don't say anything. Milano's name hasn't even been mentioned except by us anywhere. Not even any of the, insiders. Nobody's talking about Milano. Boom, the Bills sign him.
We're really good at sarcasm on this page. And that's kind of what Jenna's usually the most straight shooting one. And Mike and I kind of go back and forth with sarcasm. Mike, I don't know if you knew this, but we just went through an unprecedented year in a pandemic where things were very different. It was unusual. So I don't know if you know this, but the salary cap dropped, and that's made things unusual. Teams are scrambling right now to cut money. Maybe this was just a perfect scenario for the Bills to get Matt Milano cheaper than what we all envisioned. That if the salary cap did go up to $187 million, 87 and a half, where they thought that could have been the high end for this year, maybe Matt Milano does find a way to get $15 million a year or something like that, where Spot Track thought his market value would be. Market values right now are thrown out the window. John Brown, it's not necessarily that John Brown wasn't worth his contract. It's just the way that he was expendable to sign other guys for this price. So we've talked about it on the podcast before, that guys may take cheaper 1-year deals, bet on themselves, and go to this. This is not me saying that players should take less money to try and win. I couldn't be any more against that. Get money. But this is a very weird year where I think the Bills caught a big break by getting Milano cheaper than what he should be getting.
And I love that you brought up Brown, because in a different time, meaning they didn't draft Gabe Davis, John Brown would have been the guy that they looked at and said, hey, John, why don't you take a pay cut and we will have you back? Much like they did with Mitch Morse, much like they did with Vernon Butler, where the guy would take a cut. Now look at it. If you're that player, nobody wants to take a cut. It's not mutual, by the way. I'm going to keep emphasizing it's not mutual. The player eventually agrees because he sort of has to, right? He agrees because he's also, in the same way Milano's looking at the free agent market, Mitch Morris or any of these guys would look at it. So to your point, when they're looking at it like that, a John Brown, in many cases, would have been asked to take a pay cut to come back. Instead, they have Gabe Davis. That's a big pay cut. That's a guy who's on a 4th round pick rookie deal.
Salary,
yeah. So that's why they're able to do it. Milano, he's a really good player, and the fans, I'm sure, are pretty happy to have him back.
One other interesting note, just to kind of point out, big difference in salary negotiations between a reduction and a where they kind of reconstruct the contract. Yeah, restructure. They're moving money around. They make it into signing bonuses so it doesn't go against the cap. Mitch Morris got a reduction. Like straight up, they just took money out of his pocket, which, as we talked about in the previous blogs or previous podcasts, go check it out on buffaloplus.com. The fact that Mitch didn't go up to them and say, Brandon, I've got $2 million extra that I got kicking around.
Give it to Matt Milano.
Come on, give it to Matt Milano. No, I'm sure Mitch, again, saw the market. And like I said, unprecedented times, Mike. We've never seen teams have to slash. We always talk about it in all sports. That's the big joke, especially in the NBA more than any other league. The cap always goes up. The cap always goes up. The cap keeps going up. That's how these players, that's why these NBA players take 2-year deals, because the cap goes up more and they can get more money in 2 years.
Money. And it's all guaranteed money too. Yeah.
Correct. And this is the exact opposite. For once, the NFL salary cap has dropped and teams are now scrambling. Brandon Beane even talked about it before this year or the beginning of this year and said, if I knew we were going to have a pandemic and what the salary is going to drop, he's like, I probably wouldn't have made some of the moves and some of the signs he did.
Yes.
He's now going back and backpedaling and trying to get money back from guys like Quentin Jefferson, or like Vernon Butler, and just pretty much cutting Quentin Jefferson.
Yes. I will say this. He knew in September that the cap was going to be down because he knew there was no fans in the stands. They don't know how much. They start thinking that way. They've already signed a lot of these guys or have begun to sign them, not knowing. I mean, we didn't know. I was at the combine in February, for God's sakes. Like all this was going on, and then it started to change. So they don't know it, but use it a little bit too. Teams will use the cap as an excuse to get rid of players at times. Guys they don't want to keep or don't need to keep. So that's why I say John Brown right now don't need to keep him. Do they like him? Yes. And I'm sorry, John. I know Josh would have liked to have you back. He probably wants everybody to come back. Josh Allen ain't making the calls on the salaries and who's coming back. He's going to throw to whoever's there. So that's the way it goes. But they didn't need John Brown back. And I think they believe they need Milano and it can make it work. So now go find pass rushers because that's really what they need.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. We're going to see what happens. We appreciate you guys stopping by 10 all the time. We're getting up right away with immediate actions to what's going on, what we think, sort of what you think about it. But leave comments, questions. Make sure you make sure you subscribe because Buffalo Plus is for Dan Fetes, who I believe is having a really good day picking games in the NCAA.
Real hot.
Scorching hot.
Real hot. Follow Twitter 9-1 right now. 9-1 with UNC pending. Here we go.
Oh, look out. He could be going 10-1 day. Well, he's got a day. So a good day for Dan. For Dan Fetes, I'm Mike Catalana. Thanks for watching.